The bloodline ends with me, or begins again. I never understood why no one in my family talked about the basement. Whenever someone suggested storing something down there, my mother changed the subject. And my grandmother would simply close her eyes as if she could see another time. That day, I decided to go down alone. It was just to clean, just that. Or at least that's what I thought. When I opened the door, the air felt heavier than usual. The wood creaked, as if warning me, you shouldn't be here. I went down slowly, lighting the way with that old lamp. Dust rose. The smell was of old wood and something else, something far older. I started moving some boxes, and that's when I saw it, a piece of fabric hiding a floorboard. I pulled it, and there were deep marks carved into the wood, repeated marks, too strong to be accidental, and aligned, almost like a pattern, as if someone had pressed into it with desperation. When I touched it, a chill climbed up my arm, and that's when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. My grandmother was standing at the door, pale, holding the door frame as if her body refused to step inside that place. She whispered, barely a voice, "Don't touch that." I asked what those marks were. She approached slowly, like someone walking into their own past. She touched the wood. Her fingers trembled, and she said, "These are signs of those who endured." I didn't understand. Endured what? Time? Pain? Who? My grandmother took a deep breath, as if she were carrying 100 years of stories no one ever told. And then she said, "Your mother didn't want you to see this. Neither did I. I insisted. I needed to know." And only then, she looked at me with a sadness I had never seen before and said, "These marks, they aren't damage. They're survivals." She placed her hand on my shoulder and said, "Not today. Go upstairs. You're not ready for what's coming." As we climbed the stairs, I looked back at the basement one last time. The marks were still there, silent, alive, speaking louder than any voice. And in that moment, I understood. My family didn't keep memories, they kept survivors. After that day, the basement stayed in my mind more than the silence of the house itself. I couldn't stop thinking about the marks, about the way my grandmother touched them, about the fear and the pain hidden in her eyes. My mother noticed. She always does. And days later, while making coffee, she spoke in a low voice, like someone trying not to wake what's been sleeping inside us. "Your grandmother told you something, didn't she?" I didn't know what to say. I could only nod. My mother sighed, a sigh that sounded like it carried centuries. She dried her hands on the kitchen towel and said, "Then let's go downstairs. It's better if I show you myself." And in that moment, I felt something big was about to happen. We went down together, but this time, my mother walked slowly, as if every step were a memory. She turned on the light, And she just stood there, staring into the empty space. Not at the walls, not at the boxes, but at a point. A point only she could see. I asked, "Mom, what's down here?" And her voice came out trembling, controlled, like someone talking while trying not to cry. "Your grandmother and I, we are direct descendants, daughters of people who were never allowed to choose anything." My mother walked to a table against the wall. There lay iron tools, rusted, heavy, bent by time. I had never seen anything like it. She placed her hand above them without really touching. "These pieces," she said, her voice cracking, "weren't made for working the land. They were made for working pain." My stomach tightened. My mother leaned against the wall where the burned marks were. Her finger traced each line with reverence, with anger, with love. And she said the phrase I never forgot. "These don't condemn us. They remind us that we survived." Before going back upstairs, she looked at me, eyes full of a history she had spent her whole life trying to hide, and whispered, "Your grandmother hid many things here, and I hid even more." The lamp swung from the ceiling. The light trembled. And for the first time, I realized that basement didn't hold objects. It held witnesses. After that conversation, the silence between me and my mother was no longer the same. It wasn't an empty silence. It was a full silence, full of stories, of pain, of truths trying to come out after decades buried alive. And I knew I wouldn't be able to avoid the basement for long. 2 days later, my grandmother knocked on my bedroom door. 3 soft knocks, the kind she used when something important needed to be said. When I opened it, she didn't smile. She was holding something in her hands, something wrapped in a white cloth, yellowed with time. We went downstairs. It was strange. Before, my grandmother avoided that place. Now, it seemed like the only place she could speak. When we got down there, she placed the cloth on the table and unfolded it. Inside, there was an old photograph, torn in half, burned at the edges, and crumpled as if it had been hidden for years or destroyed more than once. My voice came out low. "Grandma, who is in this picture?" She didn't answer right away. She just ran her finger across the remaining part of the image. Her hand trembled, not from weakness, but from memory. In the photo, there was a very young woman, marked skin, steady gaze, the posture of someone who refused to bow. And beside her, an empty space, carefully cut out, as if someone had torn the other person from the image. My grandmother finally spoke. "The one missing was your mother." My heart stopped. I asked why. Why would someone cut my mother out of that photo? My grandmother took a deep breath and said something that changed everything. Because the man who took this picture did not want the women in our family to exist whole. I felt my hands start to sweat. The floor felt colder. The narration follows my breath. Grandma? Who was that man? She closed her eyes, and the answer came down like a weight. He was the owner. The last owner. I swallowed hard. The photograph seemed to burn in my hand. It was as if it were screaming, as if it were saying, "You forgot, but I didn't." My grandmother touched my shoulder and finished. Your mother never wanted you to see this picture because it was taken the day she was separated from her own mother. The image trembled in my hands. My grandmother took the photo back, folded the cloth, and said as we walked upstairs, "It isn't only pain we keep down there. It's what remained after they tried to take everything from us." And I understood. The basement wasn't storage. It was a living archive, an archive that was beginning to speak to me. After seeing the torn photograph, I couldn't sleep for days. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the empty space where my mother should have been. I saw the cut edge. I saw the missing half. And for the first time, I felt fear, not of the basement itself, but of the silence it held. At the end of that week, I decided to go back there alone. The house was quiet. My mother slept. My grandmother prayed softly in her room. I took the key, walked down the stairs slowly, and when the basement door opened, the cold air wrapped around me like a warning. I started checking the boxes, one by one, more carefully this time, as if each object might speak to me. And then, behind a pile of old utensils, I found a small wooden box, scratched all over, with fingernail marks, as if someone had tried to open it long ago. I took a deep breath and opened it. Inside, there was an old notebook, covered in raw hand-stitched fabric and held closed by a dried leather strap. The pages were yellowed, but that wasn't what scared me. What scared me was the name on the cover, written in thin, curved, delicate handwriting. Maria dos Anjos. I didn't recognize the name, but I recognized the handwriting. It was the same handwriting from the old photograph, the same handwriting of the missing woman, the same handwriting of my mother's mother, the woman my grandmother never spoke about. I punched the air without realizing it. It was as if time had opened a door in front of me. That's when I heard footsteps coming down the stairs, fast, urgent. My mother appeared in the doorway. Her face collapsed into fear when she saw the notebook in my hands. "No, you weren't supposed to find that." I froze, barely breathed. "Mom, who is Maria dos Anjos?" She closed her eyes, held a hand to her chest, and said something that split my world in two. "Your mother abandoned you, but not by choice." I felt my throat tighten. My hands were sweating around the notebook. My mother stepped into the basement. She took the book from me slowly, as if she were touching fire. And then she continued, "She wrote this before she disappeared." Before she disappeared, that word wouldn't leave my head. My mother brushed the cover with her fingertips and whispered, "If you're going to read it, you must read it with your grandmother beside you." At the top of the stairs, my grandmother watched everything, and with tears in her eyes, she said only, "That notebook changes destinies." The camera closes in on the narrator's face. Silence. Sound of old pages opening. That night, I couldn't wait until morning. My great-grandmother's notebook, Maria dos Anjos, felt like it was pulsing inside my head, like it was calling my name. And for the first time, my mother didn't try to stop me. She only asked one thing. When you open it when your grandmother is beside you. I didn't understand at the time. I only understood later.
I walked down the stairs slowly, holding the portable lamp. The basement felt different now, as if it had been waiting for me. My grandmother was already there, sitting in an old chair, her hands intertwined in her lap, her eyes filled with tears before we had even begun. I sat beside her, and carefully I untied the dried leather strap around the notebook. The pages cracked, like ancient bones learning to move again. There were drawings, words, dates, small notes written in a hurry, and lines crossed out as if someone had written them, running from time or running from fear. My voice came out soft. "Grandma, all of this, she lived through all of this?" She took a deep breath before answering. She did, and so did her mother, and the mother before her, as far back as memory can reach. I ran my hand across one of the pages, and then I saw something that made me stop. A drawing exactly like the burned marks on the basement wall. I looked at my grandmother, and she understood without me saying a word. She stood up slowly, walked toward the wall, and placed her palm over the burned marks, as if touching a beloved face. "This," she said, "is not a symbol of pain." Silence. "It's a symbol of presence." I frowned. "But presence of who, Grandma?" She turned to me with her eyes shining. "Of those who were here, and those who couldn't leave photographs, those who were left without a name, but not without a story." The lamp swayed a little from the ceiling. The light flickered, and then my grandmother added, "These marks were like secret signatures. They burned the wood to say, 'I exist, I fought, I am still here.'" I felt my chest tighten, as if each of those marks were a hand holding mine. Back in the notebook, one page was folded, as if it were the only one someone wanted to hide. I hesitated, but opened it slowly. There, in trembling handwriting, my great-grandmother had written, "If one day someone reads this, know that we were not only what they did to us, we were more. We were whole, even when they tried to break us." I felt my tears fall before I even noticed them. My grandmother wiped her own tears with the back of her hand and said, "Your mother was never able to read that part. She didn't have the strength, but you do." I closed the notebook carefully, and for the first time, I didn't feel fear of the basement. I felt responsibility. My grandmother placed her hand on my shoulder. What you started, there's no turning back. I looked at the burned marks on the wall, at the notebook, at the utensils, at the empty space filled with voices around me, and I understood. The story was beginning to tell itself. The next morning, I went down to the basement without thinking too much. It was as if something down there were calling me by my name, as if every object wanted to finish a sentence I didn't yet know existed. When I arrived, my grandmother was already there. She held something small in her hand, something she kept hidden in her closed fist, as if it were too fragile for the air to touch. She looked up at me, and without saying a word, opened her hand. There was an old key, small, bent, claimed by the rust of time. I swallowed hard. Grandma, what is this? She took a few seconds to answer. She held my wrist gently and placed the key in my hand. It's what was missing. Those words fell inside me, like a stone dropped into a deep well. My grandmother walked to a corner of the basement, where old boxes formed an improvised wall. She began pushing them aside, one by one, with the determination of someone who has carried far heavier burdens in life than any box could ever weigh. Behind them, a thick wooden hatch was revealed, so old it seemed to be part of the house itself. She touched the edge with reverence, as if greeting a long-lost friend. Here, she said, this is where your great-grandmother left what she couldn't take with her. My heart beat faster. The lock was small, almost invisible, almost symbolic. With my hand trembling, I fitted the key into it.
For a moment, I thought it wouldn't work. But then, a dry snap echoed through the basement. The lid lifted slowly, releasing the smell of stored wood, old paper, and something else, something like living memory. Inside the chest, there were only a few objects, but each of them felt like it carried an entire world. A white embroidered handkerchief, 2 worn metal earrings, a piece of cloth tied like a bundle, and, at the bottom, a small box, black, polished, as if someone had tried to preserve it at any cost. My grandmother didn't touch anything. She only watched, as if witnessing it was already more than she could bear. These things, she whispered, can only be opened by someone willing to carry the truth. A shiver crawled up my spine. I want to, Grandma. She drew a deep breath and answered with a trembling voice. Then continue. I picked up the small cloth bundle. It was light, warm to the touch, as if it still held the heat of whoever hid it there decades ago. I untied the knot, slowly, not wanting to tear away more of the story than had already been taken. Inside, there were 3 objects: a frayed piece of rope, a simple, dull ring, and a small leather strip with a name carved by hand. I brought the light closer. The name was Maria, my great-grandmother. My mother choked behind me. I hadn't heard her come down. She placed a hand on her chest, her eyes flooding, her voice nearly disappearing. She left this for when someone was ready. My grandmother closed her eyes and added, "And it seems that someone is you." I looked at the open chest, at the key in my hand, at the objects before me, and I realized that what I was opening wasn't a chest. It was a story that had been locked away for generations. After opening the chest, I thought nothing else could surprise me. But I was wrong, very wrong, because that night, the basement asked for one more truth, a truth carved where no one ever thought to look. I couldn't sleep. None of us could. It was as if that key, the same rusty key I held, had opened more than a chest. It felt like it had opened a path. And 2 days later, my grandmother called me into the living room. She held a lit candle. Nothing else. Today, you're going to see the part I never showed even your mother. My whole body froze. We went down together, this time without a lamp, only the candle flickering between us. The orange light hit the walls and made shadows ripple, as if the past were moving inside that place. My grandmother walked to the back of the basement, where the wall was darker, colder, quieter than the rest of the room. There, she knelt slowly, as if the act itself were a ritual. She tapped the wall twice. The wood echoed hollow. "Here," she said, "is where they hid what no one was supposed to remember." With the tip of the candle, she lit the base of the wall, and I saw. I saw something that made me lose my breath, carved into the wood, side by side, one above another, one beneath another. Names made with nail tips, with knives, with charcoal, with fingernails. Repeated names, incomplete names, crossed out names, names written in a hurry, names that appeared in no history book. My grandmother stepped closer and ran her hand over them, as if she recognized every letter. "They were the names of those who passed through here," she said, "and who were never allowed to record their own existence." I swallowed hard. While I looked at the wall covered in names, one of them caught my eye. A small name, written crooked, almost erased. The name was very familiar. My heart sped up. I ran my hand over it. The wood was cold. It was my name. I lost my breath. "Grandma, how can this be here?" My grandmother closed her eyes. Tears ran down her face, silently. She took a deep breath before speaking. "Because someone foresaw you." Silence. I felt the world stop. "Your great-grandmother believed that one day a girl from our family would return to this basement." The candle flickered. "She didn't know your name, but she knew you would come." I touched my name again, unable to believe it. My grandmother continued, "And when she escaped, she came back in secret, just to carve here the name of the child who hadn't been born yet." My voice cracked. She came back? After she escaped? My grandmother nodded, crying. She came back because she believed in resistance, and she believed in destiny, my grandmother whispered. I felt a warmth rise through my hands, my chest, my face. The walls seemed to breathe with me. That name, my name, wasn't a mark from the past. It was a calling. And I was finally hearing it. After finding my name carved into the wood, I didn't know what to think anymore. It was as if time had stopped being a line and had become a circle that held me in the center. My grandmother said it was destiny. My mother said it was danger. And I didn't know whether I should continue. But the next morning, when I came downstairs to the kitchen, I found my mother sitting at the table with something in her hands. It was an old envelope, yellowed, sealed with broken wax. She didn't look at me right away. She only said, "I think it's time for you to see this." We went down together, once again, to the basement. With each descent, it felt as though the house breathed deeper. My mother placed the envelope on the table and opened it very carefully. Inside, she took out a document folded in four, with slanted, almost indecipherable handwriting. When she unfolded it, the paper opened slowly, as if it had waited years for that moment. "I found this when you were born," she said. I froze. My mother began reading aloud softly. Every word seemed pulled from the silence of the basement. "This document must be given to the girl of our lineage who carries the sign of return, the girl who recognizes the marks." I felt my heart pounding in my throat. My mother continued, "She will be the guardian of what remains of us and of what they tried to erase. The story must continue with her." Silence. All I could think about was the name carved on the wall, the chest, the notebook, everything that seemed to point to me long before I existed. My mother took a deep breath and handed me the paper. Her hands trembled. She said, "I hid this for years because I thought you shouldn't have to carry this pain." She looked down. She seemed to shrink. "But now I see, you're not carrying pain. You're carrying history." My grandmother was leaning against the stairs, listening. Her eyes shone with pride and also with fear. When I finished reading the document, something in the corner of the page caught my attention. It was a handwritten sentence in lighter ink, as if it had been added later. "If you are reading this, child, do not be afraid. The truth hurts, but the truth frees." My hands grew cold. I set the paper on the table, carefully, almost gently. My grandmother stepped closer, touched my face and said, "You are recovering what they tried to bury. And when that happens, everything begins to change." I looked at the document, at the basement, at the markings, at the key, at the names on the wall. And I was certain of one thing. From that moment on, I was no longer just someone hearing a story. I was part of it. After reading the document, I felt like the basement had grown smaller, as if the walls were inching closer, as if everything inside, every object, every mark, every shadow, was trying to tell me something at the same time. That day, my grandmother asked me to go back down there alone. There is a place that only you can see now. Her voice was calm but firm, as if she were speaking to someone who had already been destined to listen. I walked down the stairs slowly. The yellow lamp flickered, and the house seemed to lean with the movement. The silence was so deep, I could hear my own heartbeat. I walked to the back of the basement, the same corner where, days earlier, I had seen the names carved into the wood. But now I noticed something I hadn't seen before. There was a darker space, a small portion of the wall that receded a few centimeters. Small, almost invisible, almost secret. I knelt there, feeling the cold floor touch my knees. With the tips of my fingers, I brushed away the dust from that forgotten corner. And then, when the wood truly revealed itself, I noticed something that froze me from the inside out. They weren't just markings. They were symbols. Small, careful, repeated. Symbols my great-grandmother and the women before her had carved into the wood, like someone leaving a map, a warning, a trail. I ran my hand over them, and for the first time, they fit together in my mind like pieces of an ancient puzzle. I heard slow footsteps. My grandmother appeared in the dim light. She didn't descend the stairs. She didn't come closer. She stood there, like a guardian. "You found it," she said. I turned to her confused. "Grandma, what are these symbols?" She took a deep breath. Her face brightened and darkened as the lamp swayed. "This is the rincón," she whispered. "The place where the women of our family left what they could not say out loud." My chest tightened. My grandmother continued. "When the pain was too much, when silence was forced, when there was no safe word in the world, she looked at the symbols with tenderness. They came here and carved into the wood what they could not write anywhere else." A warm wave ran up my back. "But what do these symbols mean?" My grandmother closed her eyes, as if searching for memories within herself. "Each symbol is a feeling. Deep silence. Fear, anger, loss, courage, hope." She touched her chest. "Love that was forbidden. Freedom that was denied. And strength. The strength to stay alive." Suddenly, my grandmother tilted her head, as if recognizing something I had not yet noticed. "Look closer," she whispered. I brushed the wood again, sweeping away the dust accumulated, and then I saw it, right in the center of that rincón. Among all the old symbols, there was a different drawing, an incomplete circle made by very small hands, with trembling lines, and a deeper mark at the end of the curve, as if someone had been interrupted before finishing. I shivered. "Grandma, who made this?" My grandmother gave a sad smile. "You." I felt my breath leave me. She approached slowly, as if stepping on fragile memories. "You were 4 years old, and you used to come here in secret. You always drew the same symbol, always in the same place. I didn't remember. Absolutely nothing.
When I asked why, you said you dreamed of a woman who called you by your name. The candle my grandmother was holding flickered. The smell of burning wax spread through the basement. The same woman who wrote the notebook, the same one who carved your name into the wood, the same one who left the chest. My throat tightened. My grandmother concluded, her voice breaking. You were always connected to her, even before you knew who she was. I touched the symbol with the tip of my fingers, and for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt recognition. I felt belonging. I felt that basement was giving back something I never knew I had lost. And there, in that dark little corner, I realized the story wasn't just being revealed to me, it was being remembered by me. In the days that followed the discovery of the corner, I began to feel the basement differently. Before, it had seemed like a forbidden place. Then it became a frightening one. Now, it felt like a mirror. A mirror that showed me not only who I was, but who came before me. And it was exactly when I thought I had already seen everything that the house decided to show what it kept hidden in its very walls. It was raining hard that day. The water hit the roof as if the weather were trying to wash the past away. With every thunderclap, the basement seemed to tremble. I went down anyway. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, I noticed that part of the floorboards had swelled with moisture, leaving a small opening. Something was shining inside. I knelt, lifted the loose boards slowly, and smelled the scent of very old wood, that mix of dust, memory, and silence. In the narrow space between the boards, there was a folded piece of paper, almost petrified by time, but still intact. When I pulled it out, it resisted, as if it had been trapped there for decades. My heart was beating fast, too fast. Before I could unfold the document, I heard hurried footsteps. My mother appeared at the door, wide-eyed, breathing hard. She saw what I was holding and collapsed. "No, you weren't supposed to find that." Her voice trembled, not with anger, but with fear. Pure fear. I opened the document slowly, even with my hands sweating, even feeling the weight of everything we had already uncovered. It was a letter, handwritten, in dark ink, with sections blurred by moisture. At the top, there was a name, "For whoever inherits my silences." My legs trembled. "Mom, what is this?" She wiped her face with both hands, as if trying to recover from a memory far too old. "I found that letter when I was your age." Silence. "I don't think I should have seen it. I don't think your grandmother wanted me to know. And for many years, I wished I hadn't read it." My mother knelt beside me. "Because everything changed after that. Everything." The letter shook in my hands. I took a deep breath and began to read aloud. The letter said, "If you are reading this, it is because our story has found a way back to itself. I left marks and objects and words because I knew they would try to erase them, but what is true always returns." My chest tightened. I continued, "You, girl, are the thread that stitches what was torn, the last of the line and the first of the memory." My mother held my hand tightly. At the end of the letter,
There was a torn-off paragraph. The paper had nail marks as if someone had tried to rip the words away. All I could read was 3 words. Don't trust the. And then emptiness, as if silence itself had been inherited. My mother took a deep breath and said something that cut straight through me. What's missing from that letter is what your great-grandmother died trying to say. I looked at the hole in the floor, at the paper in my hands, at the marks around me, and I realized that with every object we found, another door opened, another layer was revealed, another wound, too. And for the first time, I felt that the worst had not yet been discovered. After finding the incomplete letter, I knew something bigger was hidden. Something that wasn't just about objects or about silence. Something that had been torn out of our history on purpose. And no matter how much my mother tried to protect me, the truth was already moving, as if it had awakened, as if it was tired of waiting. That night, my grandmother walked into my room with my great-grandmother's notebook in her hands. She didn't ask. She didn't hesitate. She simply said,
"Today, you need to read the last page." We went down together. The basement was colder than usual, as if it knew what we were about to do. My grandmother placed the notebook on the table. She ran her hand over the cover like someone touching the face of someone who's already gone. She wrote this on the day she was taken. My skin prickled all over. The last page was stuck, glued together by time. I had to separate it carefully, using the tips of my fingers so I wouldn't destroy what was left. When the page opened, the ink looked alive. The words, unsteady, hurried, filled with fear and courage at the same time. I read in silence, and with each line, my heart beat faster until I reached the last sentence, the sentence my great-grandmother wrote right before she disappeared. The sentence that, according to my grandmother, changed the destiny of our family. I read it aloud. "Forgiveness won't save me, but the truth will save you." My throat closed. My eyes burned. That sentence felt like it was speaking to me across generations, as if my great-grandmother were there, sitting beside me, whispering in my ear. My grandmother started crying, not loudly, but a thin, restrained cry, held back for years. She braced her hands on the table so she wouldn't fall. "She knew," my grandmother murmured. "She knew they were going to tear her away from us." I couldn't speak. I could only listen. "And even so, she wrote this so you could continue." Then my grandmother lifted her face, tears running, and said something that broke me. "I never managed to read that last sentence. I never had the courage. But you were born for this." I closed the notebook slowly, as if I were putting away someone's heart. My mother appeared behind us, pale, breathing softly, as if she had heard everything. She hugged me from behind, rested her face on my shoulder, and said in a trembling whisper, "I spent my whole life running from the truth, and you are living to find it." I held her hand, tight
In that moment, I understood. This wasn't just a story of pain. It was a story of survival that needed to be told. And I, unexpectedly, unwillingly, had become its guardian. The last sentence echoed inside me. The truth will save you. And I knew that, from that day forward, nothing in our family would ever be the same. After reading the last line of the diary, the whole house felt different. The air seemed heavier, the walls seemed to listen, and the basement seemed to breathe. That night, I woke to a sound that wasn't rain or wind or the silence of the old house. It was a low sound, rhythmic, like a prayer, a plea, and it was coming from the basement. I walked down the stairs slowly, my heart pounding as if trying to escape my chest. The basement door was slightly open. A faint light spread across the floor. When I pushed the door, I saw my mother kneeling in the very center of the basement. She was holding my great-grandmother's notebook as if it were a relic, and she was crying softly, crying like someone trying not to wake memories that were too old. I stood still, watching without making a sound. My mother ran her hand across the pages and repeated, "May the past not destroy her. May the past not destroy her." Her voice trembled. It wasn't a rehearsed prayer. It was a plea, a desperate plea. I had never seen my mother like that. Never. She lifted her face. Our eyes met. And in that look, there was no surprise. There was surrender. "I tried to protect you," she said, wiping her face with her arm. "But now I understand. You weren't born to turn away from this. You were born to face it." I moved closer and knelt beside her. My mother took my hand. "I was your age when I discovered my mother's story." She took a deep breath, and I couldn't handle it. I spent my whole life believing that knowing too much would break me. She looked at the notebook, at the walls, at the markings, and then at me. "But you're different." My mother squeezed my hand as if handing me something invisible. "Promise me you'll continue." I swallowed hard. "Even if it hurts?" I asked. She smiled. But it was a sad smile, a smile that understood pain and also courage, especially if it hurts. I felt my tears fall, not from fear, but from responsibility. Suddenly, the candle's flame went out. No wind, no movement, no reason. My mother tightened her grip on my fingers. "She's here."
I looked around. I didn't see anything, but I felt it. I felt as if the entire basement had leaned forward to listen or to speak. I felt as if my great-grandmother's presence were there, between us, breathing along with us. My mother closed the notebook and handed it to me carefully, like someone passing on the last piece of a living inheritance. "The truth has already begun to move," she said. And in that moment, for the first time, my mother didn't seem afraid of the story. She seemed part of it. I looked at the notebook.
at the marked wood, at the corner full of symbols, and at the rusty key on the table. And I understood. I was no longer uncovering a secret. I was being led to it. After that night in the basement, I had the feeling that something was about to happen, something big, something that wasn't only about the past, but about everything still to come. The next day, my grandmother called me with a low voice, almost a whisper. "There's one more thing you need to see." And the way she held that phrase made me understand that it wasn't just an object, it was a destiny. We went down together, in silence. Each step seemed to echo as if the house were listening. The lamp's light flickered and cast shadows on the wall that seemed to follow us. My grandmother walked to the chest, the same one we had opened days before, and lifted the lid like someone opening a sacred tomb. She searched with her hands slowly until she found a small bundle hidden at the bottom. A bundle I hadn't seen. The cloth was thick, dark, hand-stitched with faded thread. My grandmother held it so carefully, it looked as if she were touching skin. She handed it to me. I felt its weight. It was light, but dense. As if it held something the world had tried to destroy many times and never succeeded. I unfolded the cloth, and there it was, a broken necklace. A thin chain, snapped right at the center, with a small stone at the end, dull with time. My grandmother brought a hand to her mouth, as if she had trapped a sob. "She was never supposed to lose this," she murmured. I looked at her confused. "Grandma, whose was it?" She closed her eyes, as if reopening an old wound. "It was hers." Silence. "It was your great-grandmother's." My grandmother sat down slowly, as though the weight of memory were pushing her to the floor. The necklace was the only thing her mother managed to leave behind. She ran her hand along the broken chain with both affection and sorrow. They say that this stone was the symbol of those who survived. I touched the stone. It was cold, but pulsing, as if holding a heart inside. My grandmother continued, "When they separated your great-grandmother from her mother, she held this necklace so tightly the chain snapped." My breath caught, and before being taken, she placed what was left of the chain in your great-grandmother's pocket. My vision blurred with emotion. My grandmother finished with a voice so small that it sounded like it came from inside the past. "The one who wore this necklace died for all of us." The silence that followed was so deep that it seemed to touch the floor. My mother, who had been quiet on the stairs, slowly descended and approached me. She touched the broken necklace, as if touching her own story. "I was never able to wear this," she said, her voice breaking. "But you," my grandmother nodded, "you were always the one chosen to continue." A cold feeling spread through my stomach. Not fear, recognition, calling. I held the broken necklace in my hands, closed my eyes, and for an instant, I felt as if I was touching not an object, but an entire life. And in that heavy, ancestral silence, I understood one thing. Some stories don't survive because they're told. They survive because someone refuses to forget them. And now, that someone was me. That night, after finding the broken necklace, I couldn't bring myself to leave the basement right away.
It felt like every object down there was watching me, as if the wood itself was breathing, as if the silence was waiting for something from me. I was still holding the necklace in the palm of my hand, and the more I looked at it, the more I felt it wasn't broken. I was. The story, the truth trapped for generations, everything was waiting to be reunited. My mother and my grandmother stood behind me, silent. A silence so heavy, it felt like a wall between us and the rest of the world. The lamp hanging from the ceiling swayed with a wind that didn't exist, and the light flickered. It wasn't just the basement, it was the entire story vibrating. I took a deep breath. "We need to finish this," I said. And the two of them, as if they already knew, nodded. I placed on the table my great-grandmother's notebook, the rusted key, the incomplete document, the broken necklace. And I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Those 4 things formed a pattern, an alignment, as if they were pieces of a ritual that had been interrupted and now needed to be completed. My grandmother stepped closer and said, "When your great-grandmother ran, she couldn't finish what she started." My mother added, "But maybe you can." My heart was beating so hard, I could hear the sound inside my ears. Then the hanging lamp began to sway on its own, slowly, like a pendulum marking time. And when the light hit the wall, exactly on the spot where the names were carved, I saw something I had never seen before. Behind my name, right behind it, there was a hidden symbol, a perfect circle, delicate, and carved so deeply, it looked as if it had been etched with blood. I walked toward it. The lamp's light followed my movement, as if it were guiding me. My grandmother placed her hand over her heart. My mother took a step back, frightened. "Grandma, what is this?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes were shining. A lot. My grandmother whispered, "That symbol is the mark of the last guardian." My breath stumbled. My mother covered her mouth, crying. I touched the symbol with my fingertips and felt a warmth rising through the wood, a warmth that traveled through my skin, my arm, my chest. It was as if someone was touching me back across time. I turned to my grandmother and asked, "Grandma, who put this here?" She smiled, that sad, beautiful smile, full of love. "She did." My great-grandmother, the woman I never met, but who seemed to know every step I would take. My grandmother placed her hand on the back of my neck and pulled me close. "Do you understand now, my child?" I couldn't speak, so she spoke for me. "You are what she waited for." I closed my eyes. The tears fell on their own. My mother hugged me from behind, holding me tight, as if she never wanted to let me go again. And then, in a firm whisper, my grandmother said the final sentence that would close our story. "The truth didn't save her, but it will save you." The camera pulls back,
The whole basement appears in silence. The notebook, the rusted key, the incomplete document, the broken necklace, the markings, the names, the symbols, the lamp trembling on the ceiling, and me, standing, holding the broken necklace in my hand, staring at the guardian's mark. After that night, the basement was never the same again, and neither was I. I grew, not on the outside, inside. I learned that some stories don't reveal themselves. They choose who will hear them. And without realizing it, I had been chosen long before I was born. In the days that followed, the house felt lighter. The air moved differently. The shadows no longer seemed to threaten. They seemed to protect. My mother started going down to the basement without trembling. My grandmother began to smile every time she looked at me, as if she could finally rest. And I began to record everything, page by page, word by word, not to remember, but to keep it alive. I turned a corner of the basement into a small writing desk. There, I placed my great-grandmother's notebook, the broken necklace, the key, the incomplete document, and a new notebook with an empty cover, a notebook waiting for me. I opened it and wrote the first sentence. The truth didn't save me, but it made me whole. Some nights, while I'm writing, the lamp sways on its own. The wood creaks as if someone were walking, and a faint scent of herbs and old smoke fills the air. I don't feel fear. I feel presence. I feel company. I feel that my great-grandmother, the woman who stitched silence, the woman who carved names into wood, who ran, who returned, who left clues for me, I feel that she reads with me. I feel that she guides me. I feel that she watches over me with the same strength she left for all of us. My grandmother always says, "You close the cycle that life opened." And my mother always adds, "Now you carry the light they couldn't take with them." It's strange, but beautiful and true. A month later, my grandmother called me into the garden. She was holding something small in her hand. It was the broken necklace, but now restored, whole again. She held my hand and placed the necklace around my wrist. "You gave the ending they deserved." I felt the stone touch my skin as if it were igniting an ancient flame. And in that moment, I understood. I was not only the guardian of the past, I was the beginning of a new future. Sometimes I look toward the basement and I still hear whispers, not of pain, not of fear, but of strength, of survival, of women who refused to disappear, women who, even broken, left marks so that someone, one day, could rebuild them. And today, when I close my eyes to sleep, I feel a soft voice saying, "Now you are the guardian, but not the last."